Sleeping with a nightlight on, that'll raise your heart attack risk by almost 50%. Losing just 1% of your deep sleep, you can push your Alzheimer's risk up by 27%. And oh, the dirt in your backyard, that's a natural antidepressant you're probably never touching. I didn't believe any of these things either. Then I talked to today's guest and read his book. Dr. John LaPuma is a doctor, a trained chef, and a farmer. He's the guy who first taught doctors how to use food as medicine. Now, 80% of American medical schools teach it. His new book, Indoor Epidemic, is about how we spend 93% of our lives indoors, and that basically makes our bodies think we're trapped. He even has a name for what screens and the four walls around us are doing to us: ultra-processed time. And the New York Times has now run with that phrase. But the good news for you is you already have everything you need to fix it. If you don't know me, I'm Neil K. Shah. I'm a researcher backed by Johns Hopkins and the NIH, and a caregiver myself. Dr. LaPuma, so glad you're here. Welcome to the show.
Neil, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on the great work you're doing about caregivers. I really admire it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So yeah, let's kick it right off. So I have some interesting questions, but we can go kind of off the script too. But my favorite phrase, which I think resonates with many of the people who've read your book, is "You're not broken, you're indoors." I love that quote, and it made me really rethink even just how I spend most of the time in my life. And you also coined this other phrase that the New York Times is now using and picking up called ultra-processed time. So could you break down those phrases for us? Like, what do you mean by that? How should we all think? And specifically how it might relate to people who are caregivers or older adults themselves.
You're not broken, you're indoors too much is really the idea that burnout and bad sleep and brain fog and stubborn belly fat are all things that people don't quite know, but they feel, and they don't know how to get rid of. They think it might be their genes or their age or stress or mindset, but it's actually often their habitat. And caregivers, especially, are marooned indoors often 24/7 with stale air and dim light, and basically their bodies feel like they're in captivity. Yeah. So this idea that we're indoors too much is a relatively recent phenomenon. We spend 93% of our time indoors on average, and caregivers actually more than that. And wow. It's actually wrecking our biology. And about the other phrase, ultra-processed time, we've done to time what we did to food. It is not nutritious, it's artificial, it's synthetic, it's ubiquitous. And time spent that way just evaporates. It's often in front of screens, but sometimes it's just dull inside, not moving, not doing much of anything. We lose not just muscle mass that way, but cognition. And often what looks like cognitive decline may be deprivation. And deprivation is fixable. Most people are unaware of something I call an hidden indoor health tax, which is the cocktail of microtoxins in the sealed spaces where we spend all that 93%. And the book walks you through it.
Yeah, wow, that's a fascinating point. And I think, before kind of like moving into some of the details, I am just curious, like, how does that compare, like, historically? Like, if you think back, like, couple hundred years ago, I think, like, how is this 93% number compared to like most of like human history in terms of indoor versus outdoor time?
The first time this 93% was indicated was actually 20 years ago. It's probably increased since then.
Wow.
But about 50%, about 50 years ago, rather, it was closer to 50-50. And we've had this dramatic change so that we are basically a captive species. People who are parked in a corner and don't move. And of course, caregivers often feel the mandate to stay inside. But what they don't realize is that specific targeted doses of time outside, timed correctly, actually could help them do their jobs better and feel more refreshed and feel like themselves and get out of some of the maladies that so many caregivers have.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing it. I think that I love the phrasing too, how you're looking at it, because it might help people reframe it in their mind that you're almost captive and you don't even know it, by staying indoors. So thanks for sharing. I think that's a great way to kind of reframe. Now, kind of thinking about like some of the stats you found in the book, I think I found it really hard to believe. I have a nightlight on because I have a young child, and she sometimes just like gets scared in the dark. But I think so. Going on that, you said sleeping with a nightlight increases your heart attack risk by almost 50%, suppresses your melatonin levels by up to 80%. Even I think you had something interesting in there about that. if you close your bedroom, the CO2, trapped inside carbon dioxide can cause brain fog in the morning. Can you tell us like some of the details around that of like what is the indoor environment doing to our sleep, to our hearts, to how fast we age, to things like you mentioned, like cognitive decline?
So a lot of this data is relatively new, but it's clear and not fringe. And so, for example, 40% of us go to sleep with a TV on or a lamp on. And that not just breaks our circadian rhythm when we wake up between 12:30 in the morning and 6 in the morning, giving us an increased risk of a heart attack by 50% and stroke by 30%.
Wow.
But it also gives you the signal of not just suppressing your melatonin so it's hard to get better quality sleep and go back to sleep, but it gives your body the signal that it's the day because you get blue wavelength lights from the lamp and the TV. And even more so if you look at a device, and especially if that device is close, like a tablet or a phone, where you get more blue light than you do from a TV far away, and you get a lot of blue light from a lamp that's close. It wasn't realized that this was a risk factor for heart disease at the same level of smoking and sedentariness until just last year, when this study from Harvard was published of 89,000 people who were tracked this way, both from the UK Biobank and from the Harvard database. So that's significant, and it's something everybody can do right now to improve their cardiovascular health. About mental health, which we especially care about, it is true, it's not 27%, it's actually 32% loss or increased risk. It's 32% increased risk of Alzheimer's from every 1% of deep sleep lost. It's 27% of all dementia.
Wow.
32% of risk for Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And that's because deep sleep is the phase of sleep that we get mostly in the first half of the night, 2 or 3 times in that first half of the night, that is only set by our circadian rhythm or our body clock. And our body clock is only set by sunlight, specific doses of sunlight, specifically in the morning. So the kind of, you want to get as much deep sleep as you can, which reduces as you get older, and most people think that's normal aging, but it's not. It's that they're not getting adequate light in the morning and other signals to set their body clock so that they can get adequate deep sleep.
Yes.
And so deep sleep does a lot of good things for you. It helps you rebuild bone, especially if you're osteoporotic. And it's the only time that you rebuild bone. Otherwise, if you're a woman, you resorb bone throughout the day if you're osteoporotic. You repair muscle from workout during the day. You clear your brain of beta amyloid and tau, which are the proteins that accumulate during Alzheimer's disease. And you don't run that lymphatic system or brain cleaning system unless you get adequate deep sleep. And as part of the bedroom exposures, I mean, there's that CO2 buildup, as you said. And this is just the bedroom. There are exposures in every room that most families have never heard of, but that I detailed in the book, and that are really important for us to take back our biology from the indoor confinement we've experienced.
No, and thanks for sharing. And by the way, shout out to your book. It's a really pleasure to read. I'd recommend everyone, check it out. But I think there's like action-packed insights in there. And I think that what's interesting about some of these things that you mentioned is like many of the caregivers out there who are caring for an aging parent or a spouse that's living with like Alzheimer's or dementia or even like other forms of, neurodegenerative or serious illness. I think many of them are worried about their own health, so I think that here it's like very kind of common sense things that many people can have access to that doesn't require, tens of thousands of dollars, but like slight shift in lifestyle. So I think that's super helpful. Before kind of moving to the next question, I think the one thing interesting that you said, which reminded me of like some of the things I've been, hearing and reading, I'd love for you to elaborate on are, I know that some people are saying like, okay, phone at night is bad because it messes up, your circadian rhythm. But I thought it was very interesting what you said about the morning and the sunlight exposure. Do you mind elaborating a little bit on that just so people understand? Because I think that might help people see how important that is. Is the recommendation that when you wake up, try to go outside and get sunlight, and that will affect how you sleep that later that night?
Yeah, this is especially important, not just for homebound elders who often go weeks
Yeah.
without outdoor light, without
Yeah.
at all, but
Yeah.
really for anybody who's having serious sleep problems
Yeah.
and many of the other symptoms that I described that are attributable to the indoor epidemic, a sense of burnout, a sense of brain fog, and belly fat that just is stubborn and you wish you didn't have. These things are
Yeah.
all accelerated by a broken body clock. And
Yeah.
the broken body clock is really epidemic in America because we don't get the morning light signals we have. We wake up with lamps on and with screens. We go to bed with
Yeah.
screens as a comfort. But
Yep.
what we really need to do is get outdoors within 60 minutes of waking and without sunglasses and not through a window, with
Mm.
at a doorway,
Okay.
a threshold, fire escape if you're in a city and you can't get to greenery easily.
Yeah.
If you're at a window, the window needs to be open, and look at the sky.
Yeah.
And don't look at the sun. Some people do that.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea.
Okay.
Look at the sky as far away as you can see, because your eyes
Yeah.
need distance like your lungs need oxygen.
Yeah.
And just look at shapes, understand how the wind is moving, think about something pleasant, hear sounds you haven't heard, whether they're urban or natural.
Yeah.
And what happens is that you program your body to release melatonin 14 hours later.
Wow.
Program your body to get deep sleep with all the
Yeah.
benefits that I talked about before. You give your body 50 to 100% more cortisol, which you need in the morning to wake up.
Yeah.
The people who don't get this
Yeah.
are people that caregivers see a lot, and they are sundowners.
Yeah.
Sundowning is actually a broken body clock. So
Hmm.
it's not a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
The suprachiasmatic nucleus, especially, which is the collection of 20,000 neurons in your brain that is your body clock,
Yeah.
is damaged early in Alzheimer's.
Yep.
And it's been shown that even in Alzheimer's patients who cannot get outside,
Yeah.
if they're at an east-facing window or they have a 2,500 to 10,000 lux therapy lamp, sun therapy lamp, close
Yeah.
by, that reduces sundowning, agitation, depression. And these data are not controversial. There are meta-analyses of
Yeah.
how light affects cognition, mood, agitation, memory, but most memory care facilities are not using it.
Yeah.
And, I go through the exact levels your own light bulbs for your own home should be in the book. I tell you about the ways that different wavelengths affect your brain and what you should have in your own home. But for
Yeah.
your audience, especially for caregivers, especially,
Yeah.
it's essential to
Yeah.
use light as a therapeutic tool. It can be as powerful as medication. In fact,
Yeah.
in one study, an hour of bright light outdoors for people with mild depression
Yeah.
outperformed an initial dose of Prozac 44% to 19% for reducing depressive symptoms.
No
And
way. Wow.
so, I'm not telling you not to take your medicine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am telling you we have free medicine outside if you know when to use it, how to use it, and at what time to use it, if you have specific brain and psychiatric problems that can be addressed with it. And so that's
Yeah.
what I read 2,000 studies about to put this together.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And I'll put links, to your book and, pictures of all your work. But I
Thank you.
think that practical insight on sundowning, that's worth its weight in gold. Like you have no idea, I run a large dementia caregiving platform. So many people ask me for tips and a lot of people are trying things, but stuff doesn't work. But I think that's like a very practical, simple thing that isn't an expensive, invasive drug or procedure that might benefit a lot of people. So thank you for sharing that. I think
Of course.
that's
Actually, Neil,
yeah.
I wrote this really, I started as a workbook.
Yeah.
That's why there are 250 ways to do this.
Yeah.
Try different
Yeah.
things in the book because people
Yeah.
really need to know. So many of us are captive by devices. You kind of figure, well, okay, I have my device and there's outside, but what is there to do outside? And
Yeah.
there's a lot to do on my
Yeah.
phone. I can see it, But people forget that
Yeah. Yeah.
actually
You're right.
outdoors
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's a playground, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
fascinating. It's a teacher, it's a university. We structured my own farm as a teaching farm
Yeah.
for UCLA physicians in this first in the country skills-based nature as medicine continuing medical education course, where we
Yeah.
taught UCLA docs last year to all how to garden, how to forest bathe, how to use the sky, how to use the ground, how to use the stars, how to use morning light and evening sunset, how to meet
Yeah.
people when you're outside. People forget that nature is social. And it
Yeah.
actually changes everything. And that's actually, that was the outline for how I wrote this, that you get in the
Yeah.
book everything that I taught the UCLA docs and recruited
That's
a national faculty to do.
that's
So it's a powerful way if you know that there are a lot of things to do, but sometimes you just got to be handed a kite. You just be handed a
yeah.
frisbee. You just got to be
Yep.
handed, ways to draw clouds. You have to be
Yeah.
handed different colors of green. You have to be handed shapes in the leaves and be fascinated by fractals.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think beyond just kind of like the longevity and health benefits, it's also just seems fun and relaxing, for many people to get into. So yeah, no, thanks for sharing. I think the audience could like really benefit. I think going a little bit back into your story, because I kind of gave a high level introduction about yourself, but I'd like just love to learn more. I think you've had a super unique path, that you're a trained doctor, but also a trained chef and a farmer, and it's just kind of like an interesting combination that I haven't found in people. Like, and then I kind of read that you were buying what you called a sand dune of an abandoned nursery out in Santa Barbara, and what led to all of this? And then you mentioned the doctor spending the day outside, at UCLA. Like, yeah, I guess could you just give an overview and just your life and what led to the pursuit of several interesting things?
Well, the farm, which was an abandoned sand dune, in many ways still is, taught me what the clinic couldn't. That,
Yeah,
chronic disease is often as a component of environmental deprivation that we just stop noticing.
yeah,
And I've been lucky in
yeah,
being able to explore different parts of medicine. And I think that culinary medicine, which I taught the first course in the country with, my friend Mike Roizen and I taught it together. He was the founder of the Cleveland Clinic
yeah,
Wellness Center and is now taught in 80% of schools. I think that nature as medicine is going to go the same way, that doctors will eventually
yeah,
begin to learn about it. And so that's why we wanted to teach this continuing medical education course for physicians. And it turned out that the modules for the day, and there were 6 of them, made good chapters in a book. So that's
yeah.
why I wrote the book in the way I did.
Nice.
At the end of the 1 day course that we gave physicians to teach them about how to use nature as medicine, we measured everybody's blood pressure just like we measured it to begin with. And they were down,
Okay.
systolic blood pressure was down 10 points at the end of the day.
Wow.
I mean, this
Wow.
is pharmaceutical
That's
level
nuts.
intervention
Yeah.
that is a
Yeah.
drug level effect, and
Yeah.
nobody needed a prescription. No one had any PowerPoints, by the way, either that day. The whole thing was outdoors. So you get the same protocol, room by room, dose by dose. It's magical and deliberate what the outdoors can do with specific doses at specific times.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's amazing. Not to go too off topic, but I'd just be curious for your thoughts, and I think maybe viewers would be as well. How do you shift the incentives in our healthcare system to kind of go for things like this? Because obviously there's like the current structure of the system is very much focused on like what could be billed for. Obviously you have like health insurance, pharmaceutical interests, etc. But like things like this are, I mean, 10, points drop in blood pressure is like literally that is an intervention with no side effects. I would love just your opinion on if you could run the system, how would you change it so that this stuff is incentivized by the system to teach doctors, but also doctors teach patients and families and prescribe, things like going into nature?
As you know, Neil, that's more than a $64,000 question.
Yeah, yeah, that'll take the whole episode. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
However, I mean, what I will say is that when we taught the first culinary medicine course in the
yeah,
country at SUNY Upstate over 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago, we didn't know how we would get it into the medical curriculum, but it was a goal.
yeah,
And it actually took others, once we put it out there, to adopt it as a field. And now, yes, it's taught in 80% of schools, but that wasn't enough to get it into policy. But now it's becoming part of policy. So it took 20 plus years to happen. And the way that happened was that corporations and businesses, which we'd been saying for a long time, but it just took a while for the right moments to sync up, actually realized that they could lower their costs if they had better food for employees, that they provided food for people who are underserved and medically underserved. It causes fewer hospital readmissions, fewer visits and prescriptions. I think what's going to happen is that other researchers in this new field of what's called chronobiology, how natural rhythms affect your biology and medicine, chronomedicine, will find the same thing, that it's actually much cheaper to prescribe the right doses of light, the right kind of air, the right kind of movement outside, which is called green exercise, the right habitats, have people escape their confines, much less expensive to figure out what times medicine works most effectively and what times it works least effectively. Same thing for vaccines and procedures of all kinds. And say, hey, we're leaving a lot of gains on the table. We're already seeing this actually in the corporate sector on burnout. I gave a talk at Edelman Public Relations in New York in March when the book launched, and they instituted a policy at that town hall meeting of walking Wednesdays, where everybody who otherwise is in a big giant room with not even cubicles, they're just like little desks that are all put together. There are beautiful windows outside it, but like 60 people in a room, and that's maybe like 30 by 50. And everybody now goes outside at lunch and talks with each other, goes to pocket parks, has lunch outside, has walking meetings more outside, all part of the corporate world that we don't get to experience unless you're in the corporate world, but can be not only improve creativity significantly, but also vent the room because you're lowering your CO2 level and being inside and having better cognition, better ideas, and getting some physical, not just physical exercise, but if you're walking at noon, you're getting more vitamin D production, and you're getting sunlight on your skin, which your mitochondria need because the infrared light activates your mitochondria, which are the power plants of your cells. So there are a lot of benefits we're seeing already in the corporate sector, people changing policy. There are 5 offices of Edelman PR in New York, and they're all doing it. So it's coming.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that. And it's like, even if the healthcare system adopts it slower, it seems like corporate might do it faster, and certainly individuals, might just empower themselves. I think that's awesome. No, thanks for sharing. I think, some things, another phrase that you used I thought was really interesting is this idea of like light first, coffee second. What do you think, why does that matter? And, what do you think kind of like the morning light is doing that either coffee can't, or that if you do coffee first, it might disrupt?
I love coffee and think you should drink it. It's a great antioxidant and tastes good, assuming you don't have, ventricular arrhythmia or dysrhythmia problems or are otherwise not suited for it medically. But it tends to, in the morning, cover exhaustion.
Okay.
And caffeine is a drug, a beneficial one. Yeah. But covering exhaustion is not its best role. Right? Mm-hmm. We want to feel stimulated by caffeine, more alert, more attentive, but not just less tired because it perks us up artificially. Yeah. Light, on the other hand, in the right dose at the right time, does give you an internal surge of energy from your own internal cortisol-like and cortisol hormones that you want in the morning. Because you want to greet the day. You want to feel awake. You want not to feel groggy. And if you do feel groggy, that's often other things. I haven't slept well for any number of reasons. Yeah. But that's why light first, coffee second. If you go outside with your coffee, you probably can do that. Then you're sitting, you're
Yeah.
not moving.
Yeah.
Moving is also a signal to your body clock that
Okay.
it's time to be aligned and get half of your genes working. Half of your genes are circadian dominated. Um,
Wow.
and so timing is really only one variable of when you get exposure to light, but it probably is the most important one.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Okay, no, that's a simple thing I think a lot of people can do. Then I think thinking about the impact on like aging and caregiving, which is a lot of our audience. Like caregivers are often showing up every day, for people who are living with like serious illness, and the caregivers themselves. I've been in the situation myself within my own family caregiving, and I see so many people that
Yeah.
I help through this. The caregivers experiencing sleep loss, oftentimes major sleep deprivation, depression. Sometimes the caregivers are experiencing even early death. And a lot of people are like not giving them much, like the caregiver is often ignored. And I believe caregiving itself should be a diagnosis, because of the health risks that come with it. But,
Yeah.
if you had to give a prescription for how can a caregiver like use some of your methods to maintain their own health, given the constraints that they're operating under, what do you think that would look like and how would it start?
First of all, I want to acknowledge that what you said is exactly correct. That caregivers, it's been shown in this 25-year-old study, have a 63% higher death risk over 4 years than non-caregivers. There's
Yeah.
up to 70% rate of clinical depression in caregivers.
Yeah.
Their sleep is often destroyed, and nobody writes about this.
Yeah.
And they're a forgotten group, but they need not to be. So the way I would help them first is my morning light prescription,
Yeah.
and the second thing that I've just covered, and the second way I would help them is by telling them not only will this make your time more efficient with the person with whom you are giving care or to whom you're giving care, but it will also improve your own metabolism, your own memory, your own sleep, your own ability to contribute, and your own immunity. And
Yeah.
there's this terrific study of 30 million people, which was boiled down to an 11-minute brisk walk
Okay.
reduces risk of early death by 23%, which is
Whoa. Wow.
totally, I mean, I wouldn't have believed it either, but I looked at the
Yeah.
data and I thought,
Yeah.
when you combine that with the recent study, also from Harvard, of all exercises identifying which particular exercise is best for you
Okay.
in reducing all-cause mortality, the risk of death from all
Yeah.
causes, walking came out on top.
Wow.
More than the gym, more than tennis,
Wow.
more than pickleball, more than
Wow.
swimming, more than
Yeah.
anything else. Now, there are a lot of exercises we should do as we age, especially balance,
Yeah.
gait exercises. I love plyometrics, very important.
Yeah.
But if you only had to have one exercise, it would be walking outside
Yeah.
and not on a flat path, because
Yeah.
the flat path doesn't engage all the other extensor muscles in your feet and your
Yeah.
hips and your knees and your ankles. The flat path gets rid of those. A trail allows you to adjust a little bit.
Yeah.
So now you're using balance. Now you're using
Yep.
not just gait, but vision and distance vision also.
Yeah.
And the magic about outdoor exercise is that it's 20% less perceived exertion than indoor exercise,
No way.
the
That's interesting.
same distance.
Yeah.
So if you're walking on a treadmill,
Yeah.
it feels exactly like what walking on a treadmill is. It can be
Yeah.
dissipated by the screen
Yeah.
in front of you of the French
Yep.
Alps or a Swiss
Yeah.
mountain, but
Yeah.
uh, or a TV show, and then
Yeah.
you're distracted from walking, and okay,
Yeah.
better than no movement at all. But look at all the benefits you get when you move outside. This 11-minute
Yeah.
walk, 23% lower early risk of lower early death. You
Wow.
get rich microbial air. You get to meet people. You only meet
Yeah.
people usually when you're outside, and
Yeah.
people forget that nature is social. There's a lot more than this.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that caregivers have a huge hazard, but
Yeah.
the fix is relatively small. And there's a full 7-day outdoor reset in the book that I take you through one day at a time, exactly
Yeah.
what to do. There's a little primer for it that's free at indoorepidemic.com that we give people a
Nice.
head start on. We want to combat this serious problem of early risk of death and depression in caregivers, and we can do so by helping
Yeah.
them take better care of themselves.
Yeah.
And it starts with just a little time for yourself outdoors at the right time, at the right speed, doing the right activity as early as possible.
Yeah, no, I think the suggestions are very practical and could help a lot of caregivers. Thanks for sharing that. Then, in thinking about the population that the caregivers are caring for, I think unfortunately, in our modern society, and due to sometimes things like dementia in a more advanced stage, or even people, with other forms of serious illness, a lot of older adults are homebound. And whether it's homebound in a home because of safety reasons or lack of mobility, or within an assisted living or memory care, kind of like setting.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts on, the family members or the care facilities, but let's just say family members because that's most of our audience. What could family members do to bring the outdoors to people who may not be able to physically get out there? Any ideas on that?
Sure. I mean, the most important study about this, in my view, is one done in 1984 by Roger Ulrich, who's a landscape architect at Texas A&M.
Okay.
And what he did was study people in Pennsylvania who had a gallbladder operation. You used to have to be in a gallbladder, in a hospital to have a gallbladder
Okay.
operation in
Okay.
the 1980s. And he, actually late 79, early 82, that span, he found that people on the side of the hall who had a gallbladder operation that had a window with a view of trees, not even an open window, a window with a view of trees, who had 22% less pain medication, fewer
Wow.
opiates prescribed, left the hospital 8/10 of a day earlier than the people on the other side of the hall that only had a view
Wow.
of a brick window. They had a
Wow.
window, but they only
Wow.
saw bricks through it.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and so we want to
That's
do this
remarkable.
for our homebound patients. We
Yeah.
want to get them a window.
Yeah.
Even better, an east-facing window, because then we get morning sunlight and we can open the
Yeah.
window to let the morning sunlight in. But any window, super important. And that's because weeks without outdoor light, even days, breaks their body
Yeah.
clock, results in
Yeah.
agitation, worsens cognitive decline, all the things that you know about. And so, you know, one walk a day or one wheel outdoors a day can also not just be important for the homebound person, but also reduces the caregiver stress,
Yeah.
gets you outside as a caregiver. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're a program where you have students do this
Yeah.
and go into facilities and help elderly people. I
Yeah.
mean, really, the fix is an arm. It's not an app. You want to
Yeah.
give somebody your
Yep.
arm. You don't want to necessarily give them an app. So
Yeah.
that does a world of good,
Yeah.
and people will tell you about it as well,
Yeah.
and in ways that are so rewarding and so personal. But this is something that even most memory care facilities are not doing. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
pointed out before, it's often a hidden cause of sundowning.
Yep. No, I think that alone is like that insight is gold. Like so many people are going to benefit from that. And I think, yeah, like memory care facilities aren't the best programs that I see doing this, actually, interestingly enough, are what they call the adult daycare programs. There's day centers where people drop off and pick up and take care of somebody with dementia. I find those are very forward thinking, and they spend so much time outdoors, so much time gardening. They even have built, small gardens, oftentimes within like a large commercial facility setting. So I think those are doing it right. But you're right. I think a lot of memory care, facilities could really benefit from that thinking.
Yeah,
I think,
gardens are essential for older people. I mean, not just for the physical exercise of it, the fact that it's kind of a serotonin intervention, that it's
yeah,
almost the kind of powerful tool that we've underestimated in medicine, but also
yeah,
because you tend to eat what you grow. You get more vegetables.
yes, yes,
And there are studies about this as well, about how gardeners not only have better diets than non-gardeners, but also share with others. That's part of the social connection of gardening. Powerful tool just in engaging with people, which is often turns out better than you think.
Yeah, yeah, and that was I think you kind of already answered it, but that was one of my other findings from your book was that you had the stat that gardeners have 37% less risk of dementia than people who don't garden.
Yeah,
And
that's
I think
lifelong gardeners. That's right.
yeah, and well, I think one of your interesting things, because I think you covered a lot of the benefits, was this idea of putting your hand in the soil. I guess can you elaborate on that? Like, what is it's interesting. I've never thought about it, but like your hand is in soil, and the soil has living things, and is there like some benefit that you're deriving from just doing that?
Yes, there's a trillion microbes in every tablespoon of soil. There's more than in
Yeah,
our own bodies, way more.
yeah,
And of
yeah,
course, we don't see them. They're by definition microscopic.
yeah.
But there's a lot of activity in life, especially in healthy soil. Healthy soil is often organically cared for soil, soil that
Okay,
doesn't have synthetic artificial pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides in it. And
okay.
that's because those microbes are actually doing work. They're often connecting the nutrients in soil to the roots of plants. But it's a
Hmm.
living mass that,
Yeah,
among other important roles,
yeah.
has a bacterium called Mycobacteria vacci, which
Okay.
stimulates serotonin producing neurons in the brain and in the gut.
Yeah.
Most of your serotonin actually comes from your gut. And
Wow.
dirt is actually part of the dose. So
Okay.
obviously, I'm not saying eat the dirt, although that's
Yeah.
might
Oh,
have a
you
role.
could. Yeah.
You could,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't. But I am saying having your hands in healthy soil helps that Mycobacteria vacci transfer to your
Yeah.
microbiome, not only on your
Yeah.
skin, but also in your respiratory tract and your
Hmm.
oral tract and in your GI microbiome. And that
Yeah.
has an immune protective role as well as this serotonin producing role. And serotonin
Yeah.
is a tool that you need every day. So
Yeah.
um, gardening also protects deep sleep, in five different ways. You get light, you get movement, you get
Yeah.
cognitive engagement, the microbiome I've just talked about, and the social aspect. You're often either gardening
Yep.
with someone, you're trading vegetables. Community gardens are huge wins, not just
Yes.
for the production of vegetables and fruit, but also for the collaboration, for the connection with other people to reduce loneliness, which,
Yeah.
has the mortality of three-quarters of a pack of cigarettes a day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's another thing that has been increasingly talked about. Thanks for sharing. One takeaway from that episode is definitely gardening. There's like no downside. It sounds like a hobby that many people could pick up. Then I think after all of your findings yourself, through these decades of like learning and research, if you had to pick one thing that you changed in your own life, what do you think it would be after everything you learned? What has surprised you the most that you've changed?
My sleep has improved a lot with my energy level, and
Okay.
it primarily because I think of the morning light prescription I gave earlier. I
Hmm.
actually
Mm-hmm.
practice most of this. I really am. I do run a regenerative organic farm in Santa Barbara, and so it's a working farm, and we have a lot to
That's
do.
awesome.
So
Yeah.
I am often outside early
Nice.
to organize things and to just see what needs to be done, and sometimes to weed myself or whatever. But you don't have to do this. That's kind of crazy to buy an abandoned sand dune and turn it into a farm.
Yeah.
I do not recommend that. But I do recommend what's helped me the most, which is the simple dose of getting outdoors at the right time for the right length of time in the morning to start your day. And sleep, interestingly, Neil, is the easiest thing to fix, and it's the
Yeah.
thing that almost everyone complains about as they get older. This
Yeah.
is especially important actually for older people because your lens yellows with age in your eyes, and it
Okay.
blocks the blue wavelengths that set your master clock. So somebody who's
Hmm.
75 needs a lot more light than a 40-year-old. So
Yeah. Wow.
older people,
Very interesting.
you gotta, if you have cataracts, you should fix them. Get a new lens, get a clear lens.
Yeah.
Don't get a blue blocking lens. They don't work
Yeah.
for this, and you'll be blocking the wavelengths you actually need in the morning to wake up. But again, most facilities, most families have no idea. This is one of
Yeah.
those hidden indoor health taxes that nobody measures and that is
Yeah.
actually cumulative. And it changes
Yeah.
everything about how you set up a room for an aging parent, for example.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, and thanks for sharing that. About how it kind of like your eye yellows in the lens and the need for more light as you age. That's a fascinating point. Before we kind of let you go, would love to do a lightning round or like rapid fire questions. In no particular order, if you could write one prescription on every doctor's pad in America, what would it be?
Actually, it'd be that 11-minute walk I talked about.
Okay.
11-minute brisk walk reduces causes of early death by 23%. Everybody can do it. It should be outside on a trail.
Great. Okay. If you could tell, what's one wellness trend that everyone's doing that you see, but it's actually making things worse?
Going to sleep with a television on as a comfort. People think, oh, it's good for me to go to sleep with the comforting noise of a familiar TV show. But it isn't, because if you wake up between 12:30 and 6 a.m., your risk of heart attack goes up by 50%. Don't do that. Set a timer for the TV. Set a timer for the lamp. Have them go off when you go to sleep. You'll save yourself cardiovascular risk, heart risk, stroke risk, AFib risk, heart failure risk.
Great. Okay. Thanks. What do you tell patients who've tried everything and say nothing's working?
Generally, they have not tried going outside at the right time, with the right dose, with the right activity. So I know that because we're stuck 93% indoors as a species. So try this 11-minute walk. Try the 10 minutes of morning light. It's free, and it works the first week.
Yeah. Thanks. Is sunlight actually a drug?
I think so. Dose, timing, window, mechanism, side effects. You know, it's free. Your body was built for it, and no pharmacy can dispense it, but you can prescribe it, or I'm prescribing it for you. Take the prescription.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. I love that. I think that's a great reframe too, you know? And what do you think would happen to Alzheimer's rates in America if every American got, 17 minutes outside every day?
You know, that study hasn't been done, obviously, but we know, as we said before, that every 1% of deep sleep lost raises dementia risk 27%, Alzheimer's risk 32%. And morning light's the most powerful tool we have to protect deep sleep. So if I was going to speculate, I would say we know the mechanism and the direction is clear. So I think brain cleaning, where we get deep sleep, where we clean the brain of beta amyloid and tau proteins that accumulate during Alzheimer's disease, I mean, you can only improve on how much deep sleep you get. That's restorative. I would suspect that they would decline, but I'd love to be part of whatever that study looks like.
Yeah. I'm going to propose that. I think that's an amazing thing to study.
Yeah.
And then in wrapping up all your findings from your studies, I think you mentioned you've reviewed like over 2,200 studies. If you had to pick a single finding, what was the single finding that shocked you the most?
How much control we have with free, natural approaches that have simply been overlooked in medicine, because this new science of chronomedicine and chronobiology has not been given the weight that it deserves. And the fact that I could find that many studies means that they really have not been pulled together before until now. And I think that there's not just a lot of research to be done, but a huge opportunity to improve burnout and bad sleep and brain fog and belly fat that plagues a lot of people, and that they haven't had an explanation for. There's so many different ways to get into this, to try different outdoor modalities, but we have to understand that the cocktail of microtoxins inside has made it very difficult for us to escape our indoor epidemic. We go through what those are and how to beat them, and I hope your audience gets to take advantage of that.
Yeah. Thanks, John. The interview and the conversation is absolutely wonderful. The main thing is, I think it helps a lot of people reframe, just even like your phrasing of we're not broken, we're indoors. I just think it creates a different mindset as people think about it. Even in my own, kind of perspective, after looking through all your research, checking out the book and having this conversation, it helps me reframe. It helps people get agency in what they should be doing. Where can people find your book, Indoor Epidemic? I would highly recommend people grab a copy, learn more. Where can people find it, and where can they follow you and figure out what else you're up to?
People can find me at indoorepidemic.com. There's a free 7-day outdoor reset. also at indoorepidemic.com. And you can buy the book anywhere books are sold, as well as in our store. And you can ping me on LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok. I'm at John LaPuma.
Nice.
You know, we've been blaming people when we really should be blaming the habitat. And
Yeah.
it's true that you're not broken, you're just indoors too much, but it's our buildings that are doing this to us, and that can be fixed. But right now we have to understand what the hidden health crises are, and once we do, the fixes are relatively simple.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. I mean, thank you, John. I think wonderful suggestions for the audience. To anyone in the audience, if there's one takeaway after the whole thing, is get yourself outside at least 17 minutes today. If this, makes you think someone you love or a friend of yours might benefit from this, please share the findings with them. Everybody check out indoorepidemic.com, check out the book, check out that free 7-day outdoor reset course. And, thank you, John, for spending so much time informing us, educating us, and I think just improving everyone's lives and well-being. So now everyone go outside.
Back at you, Neil. Thank you so much.
Great.
Great to be with you. Really appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks so much.